The chill of dawn carried an unsettling silence, the kind that makes your heart race without reason. I couldn't explain why, but something felt off. That's when I saw her, a shadow slipping out the back door, her every step laced with urgency, her phone clutched tightly as if it held the answers to all her secrets. My instincts screamed at me to let it go, to roll over and pretend nothing was wrong. But deep down, I knew this was the moment everything was about to change. Now, let me take you back to where the story begins. I watched her slip out through the back door without a sound, like someone burdened by a secret too heavy to reveal. The dawn's light illuminated her hurried, anxious steps as she checked her cell phone repeatedly before getting into her car and vanishing down the deserted street. Something felt amiss. It wasn't the first time she had behaved strangely, but that night everything inside me crumbled. A bitter taste, reminiscent of blood, lingered in my mouth, driving me to grab my car keys and follow her. My hands trembled on the steering wheel, a confusing mix of anger and fear coursing through me. I needed to see it for myself. I tailed her car at a distance, fighting the urge to call and ask where she was headed. Each kilometer tightened the knot in my chest. When she parked in front of a lavish building alive with lights and muffled laughter, my heart nearly leapt from my chest. Company party, she had said. It was supposed to be a work night, an important meeting, something serious. Yet there, surrounded by well-dressed guests laughing and toasting, it felt anything but serious. She stepped out of the car, adjusting her dress as if she craved attention. I lingered inside my car for a few minutes, wondering if I was exaggerating, if it was merely paranoia, until he appeared. He was tall, confident, and wore a smile that seemed far too easy for someone who knew they were being deceived. He approached her, casually placing a hand on her back, and she smiled in return. I felt something inside me break once more. Taking a deep breath, I stepped out of the car, striving to maintain my composure as I walked toward the entrance, aware that I was opening a door that could never be closed. Inside, the bright lights and pulsing music drowned my racing thoughts. I passed the guests unnoticed, like a ghost. My eyes remained fixed on her. They laughed, he touched her arm, and she tilted her head just as she used to when she wanted my attention. Then, his hand slid to her waist. I froze. My world crashed around me in that instant. I continued walking, as if my feet had a will of their own, until I stood before them. She saw me first. Her smile vanished, replaced by panic. He noticed me too and backed away, but I wasn't there for him, I was there for her. The way she turned her gaze from mine, tugging at her dress as if it could conceal the painful truth, was more than I could bear. Betrayal echoed in my mind, more painfully than I could have envisioned. My voice emerged firmer than expected as I blurted the words I knew I couldn't take back. You ruined everything, everything. Your family will know. I hope your choices were worth it. The silence that followed resonated louder than the music. She opened her mouth, ready to speak, but I turned my back and walked away, feeling the weight of everyone's eyes on me. As I headed to the car, my mind spiraled. I needed to think, to breathe, but each image of her in that man's arms unraveled the meager control I had left. Betrayal wasn't merely a physical act. It shattered everything we had built together. It held the heavy certainty that I could never look at her the same way again, that everything we shared had transformed into a lie. In the driver's seat, I grabbed my cell phone and scrolled through her old messages, the I love yous that now felt hollow, and the promises of a future that would never materialize. Then, I found her last messages from that night, calm words as if she were at home, as if nothing else were happening. The lie was cold and calculated, crafted by someone who schemed betrayal meticulously, unconcerned about being caught. That hurt even more. As I drove home, I realized I faced two choices: let the pain consume me or channel it into something greater, something that could break her the way she had shattered me. I needed proof to uproot her from my life. I had to ensure she felt every ounce of what I felt, and I knew exactly how to do it. The plan began to form in my mind, piecing together every detail from that night, every glance, every touch, and every lie spoken without hesitation. I wanted her to feel the shame of being exposed. I wanted her lover to understand what it meant to meddle in someone else's life. I wanted everyone to see who she truly was. The next day, I returned to the party venue, talked to people, heard comments, and discovered more than I expected. They already knew. Everyone knew. I was the last to find out. This realization intensified my anguish, knowing I had been the blind fool who believed until the final moment, who defended, trusted, and loved, while she plotted another life. I returned home and sank onto the couch, staring at the photos on the wall, our family, our story, everything shattered in one night. That's when I made the decision. I wouldn't be the broken man. I would be the man who stood tall, who exposed the truth, who ripped off the mask. What came next was just the beginning. The real game commenced when I resolved not to let her get away with it. I would ensure she felt every bit of my pain. It would be public and inescapable, a spectacle she would never be able to evade. I knew it would be difficult, and I knew it would hurt. But I also understood that in the end, her pain had to outweigh mine. The only lingering question was whether she was prepared to handle the weight of what she had done. Because I had one thing she didn't expect, and that would be my biggest weapon. He tried to sleep in the room, or at least he attempted to. He knew she had no peace either. The muffled sound of sobbing drifting from upstairs confirmed it. She was broken, but David couldn't discern whether her tears stemmed from genuine regret or merely fear of the consequences. The thought twisted in his mind as he turned the ring on his finger, feeling the symbolic weight of that object. 12 years together, one child, a lifetime built on trust. Now, he wondered if it was possible to continue after everything that had happened, or if their story had already concluded before he discovered the truth. He got up and went to the kitchen, opening the refrigerator, but nothing seemed appetizing. His hunger was replaced by a gnawing emptiness that grew deeper by the minute. As the sun began to rise, David slowly climbed the stairs and found Emily sitting on the edge of the bed, her eyes red, head bowed. She looked up when he entered, but silence saturated the room. He paused at the door, took a deep breath, and asked if she had considered what they would do next. In a hoarse voice, she replied that she didn't want to lose her family, that she'd do anything to make things right. He interrupted her, asserting that nothing could be fixed without justice. Emily's fearful gaze met his as she asked what he meant by that. David explained that he wouldn't let her boss get away with it. This situation wouldn't end there. Someone had to answer for the manipulation and threats. Emily desperately urged him to reconsider, saying that exposing it could ruin her reputation too, but David shot back, asking if she thought she still had any reputation left to protect. She broke down again, acknowledging that she had destroyed everything and feared the consequences. David approached, stating that fear was no excuse to continue living a lie. She asked what he intended to do, and he replied that he was going to confront the man behind this. He needed to look him in the eye and show him that he wasn't weak or easy to manipulate. Emily tried to stop him, warning that it might escalate the situation, but he shrugged her off and left. Upon arriving at the building where the man worked, David felt his heart racing. He took the elevator up, his hands clammy with sweat. Entering Emily's boss's office, he found him seated behind a pristine desk, a fake smile plastered on his face that vanished upon seeing David. The man asked what was going on, but David wasted no time. He threw the photos onto the table and demanded to know how long this had been happening. The man feigned confusion, but David interrupted him, asserting that he knew everything. He stated he was there not to argue but to deliver a warning. If he didn't resign and disappear from Emily's life, those photos would be sent to the company board and the police. The man attempted to laugh, claiming no one would believe David, but his tone betrayed his nervousness. David leaned across the table, insisting he didn't need anyone's credibility. The photos spoke for themselves. The man fell silent, but David could see he was rattled. Before leaving, he turned back one last time, warning that any further attempts to get close to Emily would result in even worse consequences. When he returned home, he found Emily pacing anxiously. She rushed to him, asking what had happened. David relayed everything. She breathed a sigh of relief, but he couldn't share her sentiment. He knew that chapter had ended, yet the weight of betrayal still lingered. Emily tried to draw closer, suggesting they could now move on, but David stepped back. It didn't change the fact that she had lied, knowing the danger. Emily attempted to argue, but he asserted that he needed time, space to process everything before deciding their future. Over the following days, silence enveloped the house. Emily tried to connect with him, but David maintained his distance. He took long runs, spent more time at work, and avoided deep conversations. At night, Emily cried, but David felt unsure of how to comfort her, if he even wanted to. He contemplated Nathan and the impact this turmoil would have on their son's life. He ruminated on the love he still felt for Emily, while also being acutely aware of the pain she had caused. The moral dilemma consumed him. He could forgive her, but could he ever trust her again? He recognized that without trust, nothing they had built could endure. Emily, on the other hand, was determined to fight. She tried to show David her remorse, wanting to rebuild what they had lost, but each attempt seemed to push him further away. She knew he was hurt, but time pressed against them. Every passing day deepened the chasm between them, and a gnawing fear took root in her heart. He had already given up, even without uttering it. David grappled with his emotions. Part of him yearned to believe her and grant her another chance, yet another part remained trapped in the haunting images and words echoing in his mind. He knew he had to make a decision, yet the fear of repeating the same mistake paralyzed him. Torn between the desire to move forward and the need to protect himself, he recognized that the end of their story was nearing. As the days dragged on, the tension thickened, preparing the ground for an inevitable outcome. David awoke on the couch for the third night in a row. The clock read almost 5 in the morning, and the room was shrouded in darkness. His body ached from the uncomfortable position, yet the physical discomfort paled compared to the weight on his chest. The house was silent, but it wasn't the usual peaceful quiet. It was a dense silence, heavy with everything said and everything left unsaid. Emily remained in the room, and he had no clue if she had slept or spent the night crying as she had previously. The tension had become palpable, and David knew it couldn't last forever. Something needed to change. That morning would be decisive. He rose slowly, feeling the cold ground beneath his feet, and ascended the stairs. The bedroom door stood ajar, so he pushed it open gently. Emily sat on the edge of the bed, her eyes fixed on the window. She didn't turn when he entered. David lingered before her until he finally broke the silence. He asked if she had contemplated everything discussed in the past few days. She nodded but didn't meet his gaze, admitting she thought about it constantly and how much she had destroyed. She pleaded for one more chance, one last opportunity to prove she was sorry and willing to regain his trust. David took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her words, but remained silent. He walked to the window, searching for answers he couldn't find. He hesitated before voicing his uncertainty about forgiveness, confessing that the fear of reliving that pain was greater than he could bear. Emily approached, touching his arm, but he recoiled, stating he needed to be honest. Perhaps the love they felt for one another was insufficient to overcome this. Emily began to cry, but David pressed on. He couldn't live trapped in distrust, nor could he face her daily, wondering if he was being deceived again. She implored him to consider therapy, to do anything to save their marriage, but David shook his head, saying he didn't want to fix something already beyond repair. Emily sank to her knees, begging him not to give up, but he simply exited the room. He gathered some clothes into a small suitcase and left the house without looking back. As he drove away, tears began to flow. He didn't want it to end this way, but he knew there was no other choice. He loved Emily, yet love alone was no longer sufficient. He needed to escape to protect himself and Nathan. David sought a fresh start, even if it meant leaving everything behind. In the ensuing days, he found a small apartment, began to reorganize his life, and contacted lawyers to initiate the divorce process, assuring her that Nathan would have shared custody. Emily attempted to reach out several times, but he maintained his distance. He avoided responding to her messages and dodged meetings that weren't relevant to their son. With each encounter, he felt a mix of pain and relief. He knew he was making the right choice, yet it didn't ease the heartache. Gradually, David began to feel lighter. He resumed his morning runs, focused on work, and for the first time in months began to see himself as someone who could move forward. Emily, meanwhile, sank deeper into guilt and regret. She attempted to start anew, yet every step served as a reminder of what she had lost. She resigned from her job and severed ties with her boss, who had also lost everything after the photos were exposed and faced legal repercussions. Emily sought help to process her trauma and mistakes, but nothing seemed adequate. She missed David, she missed her family, yet she understood she had crossed a line with no return. Nathan became her sole anchor, yet even he couldn't fill the emptiness gnawing at her each day. David moved on with his life, but it soon became clear that there was still a chance for new beginnings. He met someone by chance in a coffee shop, a discreet woman with a kind smile and a way of speaking that put him at ease. Their interactions began as casual conversations, slowly evolving into something deeper. David felt hesitant at first, fearful of reopening his heart, but he realized he deserved something new, someone who didn't carry the burdens of lies and betrayal, with whom he could build a story free from ghosts of the past. Meanwhile, Emily watched from a distance, aware that David had moved on. Although it hurt to see him with someone else, she acknowledged it was the result of her own choices. She attempted to convince herself she could learn to bear it. But the days dragged on, feeling endless. Her friends distanced themselves and her family judged her. It felt as if she were paying for every lie and wrong decision, though even when she sought reasons to persevere, there were nights when regret overpowered any flicker of hope. As for Emily's old boss, the man who had instigated this entire chain of destruction, he faced public downfall. The photos leaked, and his reputation lay in ruins. His wife left him, his children severed ties, and he lost everything he had worked for. Forced into isolation, he bore the weight of his own actions. In the end, no one emerged from this story unscathed, but some learned to rebuild, while others were devoured by their consequences. One night, David watched Nathan as he slipped into sleep, feeling an unexpected relief wash over him. He didn't have all the answers, but he knew he was on the right path. The pain still lingered, but it no longer defined him. He learned that starting over didn't mean erasing the past. It meant accepting that it was part of who he was. For the first time in a long while, he felt a sense of peace.